We're going to talk tonight. We put together this webinar right before you guys all hopped on. We were talking about it because we are hearing a lot from behind the scenes about just tough situations where people are losing money, getting taken advantage of. And then people come and talk to us and they're like, this horrible thing happened. You hear the bad stories. In our business, we hear a lot about wire fraud, but there's a lot of other circumstances where, unfortunately, friends, clients, community members are losing money due to other types of real estate fraud. And so we are hoping to raise some of those issues, raise your awareness, kind of teach you what some of the red flags might be so you can get ahead of it. Because unfortunately, Troy, it's once it happens, it's pretty tough to get it back, right? It's a long road at the very least. And with wire fraud, it may not ever happen. Troy St. George is joining us from CW Title, and he's kind of on the front lines when we're seeing things like wire fraud. Tell us what this looks like in your world.
Yeah, it's a matter of knowing who you're working with, right? And if your clients are working with ABC Title and Escrow, make sure that you and your clients all know what ABC Title and Escrow's process is for wiring funds. They're all a little different. CW has our own, and knowing that up front, and then making sure that they're followed. For example, we won't ever email, text, or email, text, or phone call with wire instructions. So when a buyer gets wire instructions via email purporting to be from us, they shouldn't follow them. And we've got all kinds of notifications and all of that. And I always like to say is take it back to third grade basketball, especially when you're hitting the button to send a bunch of money. When in doubt, call timeout. And my brother was buying a home with us. He got his wire instructions via our secured method. And he's like, oh, well, I think I'm just going to email these to my financial advisor and have him wire it. And I said, but if your financial advisor is compromised, they could spoof it and send it to the wrong place. When in doubt, call timeout, call your title and escrow company, verify those wire instructions.
Let's talk about what that looks like. Where are they typically taking advantage? When you say compromise, where are these criminals entering our transactions and taking advantage of folks?
Yeah, so that's where AI is making kind of some older fraud techniques much better and opening up a wider net. So generally speaking, what we find is clients have clicked on a spoof. We all get spoof or phish emails all the time. They click on that and then they're in the fraudster's database. And those fraudsters then are tracking for keywords. They're looking for closing. They're looking for purchase and sale agreement. They're smart. They've been doing this for a while. The AI allows their emails then to, well, cast a wider net. But then they're waiting until what I call the danger zone, like the last 10 days prior to closing, and they're jumping in and they're spoofing emails of the escrow company. Typically, sometimes it's the mortgage company, sometimes it's even the real estate brokers. And they used to have the emails then they're sending to the buyer for their closing funds. And they used to have grammatical errors or wouldn't have industry language, if you will.
Right.
And I've seen perfect ones where it's like, if you didn't really look at the email address, that could have come from our escrow closer, but it was a total spoof. Clients don't know this. They aren't following the procedures and they're wiring hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever their closing funds are. In a cash situation, could be millions of dollars to the wrong fraudulent account.
And I think one of the other reasons we wanted to raise this is because most of us would say, oh, I'm pretty savvy. I know what a phishing email looks like, right? Like I'm not going to fall for that. But as we're discovering, when people are hopping in, they're not only doing much better impersonations, but they are also taking advantage of kind of pivotal points in the transaction. As you said, your brother was making this decision, right? You're kind of under the wire. Everybody's moving fast. Our transactions are typically coming to a quick close. And so it's a really good opportunity for somebody to rush when they should.
They're not doing it on the third day after mutual, right? They know the game at this point, and they're taking advantage of the buyers who's trying to line up their insurance with Moreland. They're trying to line up their moving trucks. They've got to make sure that the funds are coming from the accounts that they want the funds to come from, and all of these different things to make sure that there are distractions. And so they're like, all I know is I need to get the money to the escrow company, and then they're not seeing that. So again, our processes that we have is in that danger zone, we make another phone call call to the buyer to say, don't listen to any emails, text messages, or phone calls that you get in regards to wire instruction. We will disseminate it to you in this way. And because not everybody works with CW Title and Escrow, it's not how it works. Make sure you and your clients know whatever title, typically escrow company you're working with, you know their process. And again, I wouldn't ever send a wire of significant sum without calling a verified number to verify those instructions before I would say hitting the button. Some people go into the bank to do it and others do it from their laptops.
Well, and I think our brokers are really good at explaining kind of what the entry points and the fear around wire fraud, right? We have a handout that we give to people that's inside of transactions where clients are arm's length to us and we can offer some counsel. I know that the escrow closers are also saying be really careful. What about when we're not in an environment where we get to say, hey, we're working together on something, heads up, this might happen, like when somebody's got a piece of vacant land or an investment property somewhere, because these are what we're starting to see happen. And we're hearing more stories about properties being sold out from underneath people where they didn't even have a chance to protect themselves. What
Which
does
is
it look like?
Yeah, which is where AI is having an effect on, again, another type of kind of traditional fraud, for lack of a better way to put that, seller impersonation fraud, of which we have seen pretty rampant for the last 3 or 4 years. What that is doing is it's there's obviously no interaction with humans other than the brokers that they're oftentimes trying to get to list the property. What it is doing and how it is having a wider scope on that
Trying,
is
just to clarify, when you say trying to get to list the property, you've got a property out at Westport. The they is the criminal, right?
the fraudster, yes.
Yeah,
So
the
the
fraudster.
fraudster, and again, the AI it's widening their net. They're able to go through so many properties so much faster and hit things so much quicker that they can comb through King County in 3 days, find out all of the properties that are non-owner occupied and or vacant land with, non-local tax addresses, and then ping those out to brokers and to try to get them to list those properties.
And are they often looking for properties that are already, the mortgages are paid off, no mortgage on it? Does it make a difference?
We have seen fraud on properties that had secured debt on it, but the higher rate is those have only been a few. Most of them are unencumbered, non-owner occupied, unencumbered. But we have seen some that have been encumbered with
Because
the deed
the
addressed.
the
Yeah.
payoff of the mortgage would be one of the things that would hang it up as it's going through closing.
Yeah, I think they made a mistake in their research on those few that I saw. I call it research, in their fraudulent research. I think they made a mistake and didn't realize that there was security on it because it was such an anomaly that we ran across. But yeah, they're doing this, and so the question is then, how do you protect yourself? And I don't want this to be a commercial for title insurance, but it actually is super beneficial because you've got things like Title Lock, which we've all heard about. I've been in
Well, maybe not everybody. So explain
Okay.
title.
Title Lock is a company. If you're awake at night, turn it on regular TV at like 12:30 in the morning, and I think Rush Limbaugh's doing a pitch for them. You sign up with Title Lock, you pay a monthly fee, you can pay an annual fee too at a lesser monthly rate, and they then flag your property. And if anything records on your property, they notify you. They've got $1 million guarantee that they are gonna try to work. There's so many caveats. I've read it. I've even punched it into AI to should have it kind of give me a synopsis of it. And I've been in the industry for 30 years in title and escrow. I don't have Title Lock.
But if something records on my property, it's probably been sold, right? So
Oh,
it's going to tell
maybe.
maybe.
So there are like all King Pierce, Snohomish, Kitsap, Thurston doesn't have it yet. They have free things that you log into the King County or Pierce County auditor's office. You punch in your email address, you punch in your parcel number, and they'll notify you if anything happens.
Okay, so that's like tip or takeaway number one
Absolutely,
here.
so important.
Yeah.
I have that in King County, and the challenge with that is it's after something has happened. So there is nothing out there. There is a reason why it's called the public record. The county recorders legally have to record anything that's presented to them that fits the recording platform format. And so I could go down and record my marriage certificate. I wouldn't, but I could as long as it met the formats for recording. they're not checking to see if it's a legitimate deed. I can go down and record a deed and forge all of your names and all of your signatures on all of your homes, deeding it to me. Right? They're not checking that. The question becomes, though, is what have you really lost if I do that at that point?
Mm.
Right? So the concept of having your property sold out from under you is only as to what then takes place after that. So, for example,
But somebody has scammed someone else out of their money. Your property's been used as the right.
well,
They
possibly,
Yeah.
right? If there was any money that changed hands. So in our transactions that we're dealing with, where there's a listing agent that is hired by a fraudster, they list the property, we get a buyer, we go mutual, we have a 30-day close, and it closes, which knock on wood, CW has not had to happen yet. And it closes. Truly, the seller has not sold the price. It hasn't been sold out from under them. There is a fraudulent deed out there that the buyer thinks they own it. The seller still owns it. It's akin to somebody stealing your car and then selling it. You still own that car. So nothing has changed. Where it really gets tricky is when that sale transaction happens and nobody knows any different, right? And say it's a builder that buys a vacant lot. Nobody knows any different. The real property owner doesn't know. The neighbors haven't told him about it, which is usually how this happens. Thank goodness we have these notification things now, right? Where the counties are notifying us. Free, by the way. It's title lock, not free. The county's letting you know it's free. The trick that really gets where it gets really messy is if obviously that builder is going to think that they own that property and probably want to build a home on it.
Yeah.
So they start building on it. And then the true owner ultimately finds out. Again, they still own the property. They have never conveyed title like the houses that we all live in until we sign a deed conveying it to the buyer. We still own it. And that's where it gets tricky and gets really messy and bad things happen. But why all of our
But
title?
okay, wait.
Yep.
So what does happen at that point? So they come back to you as the title insurance company and start asking questions, right? How does somebody get their property back from a situation like that?
We insure a buyer that they own a piece of property, whether it's vacant land or non-owner occupied, second home, etc. If we insure somebody that they own a piece of property, then we have insured it that they own it free and clear of anybody else's interest. Now the title company has a giant problem because we have an owner's policy insuring Dave when really Alex is the owner. And so Dave's got a policy that says he's protected for the purchase price, say $150,000. And so now I owe Dave $150,000 to pay off because Alex still owns it.
Mhm.
And the fraudster made away with the net sale proceeds on that. Again, where I mentioned where it gets really tricky is if the builder starts building a home on it. Dave's got a policy for $150,000. He's the builder in that scenario. That's when the lawsuits happen. It gets really messy, and the settlements out there are varied between negotiation from the real property owner trying to negotiate a higher sales price because now Dave is reimbursed for his purchase price from the title company, but he could have $300,000 in building costs that he's already sunk into it. That's where the true mess gets, and that's when lawsuits happen, and everybody starts trying to figure out now what do we do.
Well, and part of what we were hoping to pull forward with this conversation is the idea of, I think sometimes when people are looking for fast or easy, right, or something simple, or we're going to take a cash deal, right, or I got this letter in the mail that said this is going to be no problem, there are some critical steps that they're missing potentially, and the decision, one of the ones you're alluding to, is like in a cash deal, simplified purchase and sale agreement, you might decide not to get title insurance. Somebody might want to save some money if there's no mortgage. When we're selling properties that have mortgages, the mortgage company is requiring
Yep.
title insurance, a lender's policy, right? And our state contract, sorry, the trains are loud tonight, requires title insurance. But if you were doing a cash deal and it was just something simple, you might not have title insurance. And so you might not have a claim to be made there.
At that point, then it's up to the buyer, if they don't have title insurance, to go back and try to unwind the fraud and get the money out of the fraudsters. And that's never going to happen because they all disappear into the night. And it is not something that I've ever seen. And even in wire fraud, recovery of misappropriated wire fraud funds, recovery is hit and miss. It just depends on timing. It depends on how quickly we know about it and everybody knows about it. We can start the wire, the kill chain. And yeah, it is definitely, and again, not to make it a commercial about title insurance, but it's the exact reason why people buy title insurance. It's so fundamental. Am I buying, is the person who is signing the deed and selling me this property really the person who's authorized to do so?
And that was one other thing we wanted to remind people, if they're watching this before or in the middle of a transaction kind of in the future, is if the title company is asking you a bunch of personal questions and you feel like, wow, this is really intense, it's because you guys have a duty to verify that you are dealing with the actual owner of the property for this exact reason. And so things are changing and processes are changing to try and protect folks.
100%. And that duty comes out of the fact of consumer protection, and simultaneously, it's our dollars at stake if we're wrong.
Yeah.
And that's why we're so hyper vigilant about
Are there other scenarios like this that you're hearing about, or things that, if you got somebody's ear and you're like, I wish people would know this beforehand, or I wish folks would be paying attention to this. And I'm thinking about people who are outside of transactions. As realtors, we at least have the opportunity to offer some protection or say, heads up or call me if anything seems funny. But I'm worried about the folks who are not currently doing a deal and are sometimes too embarrassed to ask for a second opinion, or they don't want to bother someone,
it.
or they just might not see it coming.
I've said that, well, how long have we been talking about wire fraud and now seller impersonation fraud? Forever. I think we all have fraud fatigue. That's exactly when we need to keep talking about it, because
Wait.
a buyer now or a seller now, maybe not, it maybe hasn't sold in the last 10 years. They don't know anything about any of this. They don't know. So I think keeping the narrative going, because this isn't going away. I wish it would, because it would
Yeah.
be a lot simpler. I'd have a lot easier. Title insurance would be a lot easier if it was not here. It's not going away. And as a just general consumer, I would, because of how I have seen the fraudsters work, and I only have a 5% glimmer or a window into what they do. But because of is to be careful, and I know this, everybody says this, MFA on your email, multi-factor authentication.
Yeah. I was like, come on now.
I know, but some people, they don't even know what it is,
Oh, no.
multi-factor, and be careful with phishing emails, and just be, if you're, because even though you think that they then may steal $500 off of your credit card and, oh, I've got credit card protection, so that's not a big deal. They're lining it up over here for other things that potentially could happen 2-3 years down the line. And so it's kind of that hypervigilance in general affects everything else that you may be doing. And you may click on a phishing email and have your email compromised and not know it for a year, and they've
Yeah.
been sitting there watching. The other thing would be is to, in your email in particular, look for forwarding rules. The fraudsters will typically, because
Mm.
they know they're going to get caught, right? Or possibly get caught, look for forwarding rules in your email. We all have them, right? Oh, take it and send it to this folder. Look for forwarding rules that you don't know, because what fraudsters, one of the first things that they do when they compromise a person's email is they go in and set up a forwarding rule to then forward all of those emails coming in to them. So you can change the password 15 times. That forwarding rule is still sending all of those emails to them. So for all intents and purposes, they're still in your inbox.
Wow. Yeah. The other one that sorry, Dave. The other one I heard mentioned recently was not only should you be logging in to like the assessor's site and make sure that you've turned on the notifications, but also is your mailing address correct? Like, are you
Yeah.
taking your mail because you might get a notice of something and people forget to update those things and it's getting
Oddly enough, a couple of years ago, it's changed a little bit, but oddly enough, one of the triggers was out of state mailing address. And so they had just assumed that the person wasn't close by. I have seen and had people tell me, I don't know if I subscribe to this, but what they would do is they'd change their out of state mailing address to one of their relatives in state, so that they would not be flagged by the fraudsters, so that it looked like they were at least local and paying attention.
Mhm.
So it was a unique twist on things, you really have to trust that relative to make sure that they're gonna send you the tax bill. But yeah,
I
it was
think
a unique twist on it for us. But yes, that is correct. That is very important to make sure that that is. And the funny part is when I'm doing my fraud vetting, I would say 15 to 20% of the tax addresses are not the address that people say is their current address in our transactions. So
yeah.
keeping that up to date is super important. Good point, Ann.
Couple of sort of what seem like fairly simple things, but
Yeah.
could be really effective. Dave, it sounded like you were going to jump in with some questions.
No, just even for like a basic one being like just checking the email. I know we're talking about maybe someone took over someone else's email, but I always just check the email because I get tons of them because I'm in crypto. So like scams are just part of the daily thing. And one quick check is just who's it coming from, and then chances are, even no matter how good the email looks, sometimes there's like one letter off. It looks really like the sender. And sometimes there's like one letter off or anything like that. But yeah, that's just my quick check. But
Yes.
Alex Boost.
I was gonna say, Dave, the spoofed email that I've most recent one I've seen spoofing CW's escrow team with an email of wire instructions was CW title, and title, the I in title.com was a one.
Yep.
And
Yeah, that's
and our
and most times we're just glancing.
our clients didn't notice it, and the email was perfect, timed perfect, wording perfect. Wire instructions looked really similar to our wiring instructions, but because we had pounded them with the procedures and their broker had pounded them with the procedures that we
Yep.
would do this, they raised the flag and didn't send the money. And that's really truly their vigilance is what saved them their hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, it could be that one letter that saves you. We also have Alex Busilacchi with us, and he's with Moreland Insurance. And I would like to hear from Alex. Like, what are you seeing in the on the insurance side of things?
Dave, I couldn't hear you there for a sec. What was that?
What are you seeing on the insurance side of things in terms of AI and fraud and how it's impacting over on the
Yeah.
insurance side?
Yeah, I think, pretty along the lines of what Troy was saying, we're seeing kind of on our side of things where fraud kind of jumps in. Actually, there was with AI specifically, there was kind of a big push at first where kind of these really structured theft pools of these organizations of people that do that, they'd use AI to actually take photos off of the MLS or Zillow or Redfin or whatever it was. And they built almost kind of like an AI assistant thief bot to be able to analyze photos of the home, what type of security systems were in the home, if there were any in the photos, kind of everything in between. And what they would do is they're able to now case a house and basically the blueprint of it and have AI kind of create almost a plan for them. Anytime you've used AI, sometimes if you ask it questions, and Troy, I know you've kind of mentioned this where it'll say, "Hey, stop, I can't do that." You can almost kind of use reverse psychology and then just say, something along the lines of, "Well, I'm in a class and this is the scenario," right? You can kind of almost manipulate it to get it to do what you want it to do. And that happened quite a bit. So there was that side of things. And then also, I mean, from an insurance perspective, where we're getting hit, I would say the hardest is on the carrier side, them using AI to basically take over underwriting. So whether it be aerial imagery, climate forecasting, actually scouring the MLS to look for vacant homes, to look for homes that they insure that are vacant. They're utilizing the power of AI and the speed of AI to be able to do things that they had maybe 40 or 50 people doing on any given day. And now they have maybe 5 people doing it, along with the help of AI, kind of scanning those things. And I know in Washington specifically, they have a lot of the carriers use AI to kind of scan aerial systems and your roof and all that. And there was an issue for a little while. I think they corrected it now, but basically these AI were mistaking moss and algae for your roof, kind of like the granular pieces of your roof deteriorating. So they didn't know it was moss. They didn't know it was algae. They thought it was your roof deteriorating. And 45 days later, you get a cancellation notice because your roof isn't in good condition. And some of these roofs were 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old roofs. So,
That's
there's so many.
that's just how the moss grows here in Washington.
Yeah, I guess right. And we all know that locally, right? And so there's been there's a lot of good things that are happening with it. But there's also things just like everything else, I guess, in this world. There's a lot of kind of there's the learning period, and then there's the negative things that can happen in people utilizing certain things to take advantage of certain systems. So we're very, adamant on making sure that we're keeping our clients kind of up to speed on what's going on, how to use kind of AI in conjunction with insurance and staying on top of things.
Alex, just to, because I don't want to lose the thread of what you're putting forward here, which is, since our theme for this conversation is protecting your equity,
Right.
that's a really good example of, okay, you just suddenly got dropped by your insurance company. How would you suggest people either kind of get ahead of that or respond to that? Like, you've maybe been able to navigate that circumstance. What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, to me, and I know, for a lot of people, and I know it was for me as well, insurance, maybe just like title insurance, sometimes, with insurance, it's repetitive and you can lose track really, really quickly. It's something that you feel like you have to pay for, which you do have to pay for, but it's kind of almost like a pain to pay for, and I don't really use it. But the people that really kind of do understand it is the people that have gone through these, circumstances where it either saved them or they didn't have what they thought they did, and it created a really big problem for them. So, what we say, and we kind of always go back to the kind of the most simplest of things. It kind of goes to what Troy said, but it's kind of taking a time out, but just have someone that you trust that you can call. Do not use AI to answer your insurance coverage questions or review your policies. You can utilize it to drum up questions for a professional, but not to analyze certain things. So,
well, and wait, I don't want to lose this because we've been talking about this a lot in the office. You don't want to put your confidential information into ChatGPT and say, like, take a look at my policy and tell me if my rare jewelry and furs are
right. Yeah, definitely not into a public platform. So if you're just using the free version, definitely do not put any type of private, even your name probably isn't a good idea. But if you have paid versions, which there's a lot, whether it be ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, there's, basic level $20 versions. And even those, if you actually look at it, the security around those is 5 times what, maybe even more than that, than the free version is. And in those cases, you can copy and paste contract language that doesn't have your specifics into it to kind of get a better idea when you're looking at a policy declarations page or your just policy terms in general, to kind of help you, kind of put it into maybe a bullet point format and like give it in layman's terms, right? And kind of, how does my coverage respond? That is perfectly fine. But what we really want people to do is every year, or maybe even, every other year, have your insurance reviewed by a professional. If you go to your current carrier, go to your current broker and just say, hey, renewal's coming up. Is my reconstruction cost amount, my coverage aid dwelling, which most everything else in your insurance policy is based off, is it up to speed, right? Where are material costs a lot higher than they were 15 years ago? Probably, right? So, we have a big issue of that in a couple of years ago when, lumber, copper, paint, everything in between to build a home, it was 25, 35, 40% higher than it was 10 years ago. So people were sitting there not knowing that they were severely underinsured on their home. So just putting it a little bit, insurance doesn't need to be front of mind for anyone, right? We don't want to think about insurance all the time. I'm not saying that, but maybe just a little more thought into, hey, you're going to look at it when you get your renewal, and the first thing you're going to look at is the price, right? How much did it go up, or did it go down, or whatever it is? Probably went up. But actually having someone take a look at the coverages to make sure that they're kind of in line with what you have going on, maybe any updates you've done to the home, all those little things can really go a long way, especially if something does happen.
Well, and if you did that, would that, do you think, be a hedge against the idea of some sort of automated renewal where they are using AI and the AI looks at
it absolutely could. It absolutely could be, because they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on fine tuning these AI systems. So they don't have to have 50 or 60 people kind of checking everything. But we do lose a little bit of the human judgment as well. We normally get to negotiate with underwriters on certain things, right? So if one of our clients gets a cancellation notice, and they list 2 or 3 things, we normally can go talk to the underwriter and work kind of on behalf of our client with our client and the underwriter. Those conversations are getting a little bit thinner now because now we're dealing with, this system found these 3 or 4 issues. And so now we're having to take that information and basically kind of cross-reference it with, is it reality? Is it something that they just, is there a mistake here? All
Is
those
that,
things.
is that how you would advise people though? If they are dropped, for example, would you encourage them to go back and say, how was this decision made?
Of
Was it
course,
automated?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And legally speaking, the insurance carrier does have to give a reason. They can't just say we don't feel like it anymore. They have to actually acknowledge that, hey, it's the roof, it's the cooling water, it's the no railings on your stairwell. A lot of what carriers do is they're just going to triple the price, so they hope you leave and almost kind of cancel for them without them having to cancel you outright. So there's a lot of manipulation tactics on their end. And that's when it's really good to have, someone in your corner at least, along with your AI assistant to kind of help, figure out what other options are there.
You're making a really good segue to the idea of getting dropped, because one of the questions that we get a lot of times as realtors from our clients is the idea of, ooh, we had this thing happen at the house. Should we claim it on our insurance because we're worried about getting dropped? Everybody's feeling very paranoid about multiple claims, and perhaps rightfully so, because that may end up on your clue report down the road.
Right.
How would you answer those questions? What kind of guidance, I guess, would you
Yeah.
give
And
homeowners?
it's probably the one of the funnest conversations, and I'm being sarcastic when I say that, because when you tell people, hey, don't use your insurance that you pay for to fix this certain thing, then it's kind of like, why am I doing this? Why am I paying for it then? And why am I paying this, in some cases, this exorbitant amount for it if you're telling me not to use it? A lot of things have changed in the insurance market, and one of the things that comes up every day, every week for us is prior claims on a home, not a person per se. There is that element to it as well, but prior claims on a home, specifically water losses, can in fact affect the future buyer's insurability on the home, and that indirectly can maybe affect, or directly, I guess I should say, affect possibly the sale of the home. We've seen on multiple occasions, albeit it doesn't happen a ridiculous amount, but it happens quite a bit where, things get into mutual, financing is waived, contingencies are waived, and the buyer finds out that they have to pay 3 or 4 or 5 times the amount on their insurance premium than they expected. And now you're getting into some back and forth, some secondary negotiations. Now are you past the debt to income ratio for the lender? And are you going to be able to get your financing? All those things can lead to really bad situations. So, we're always of the mindset, again, kind of going back to maybe insurance just needs to kind of go up the totem pole a little bit in regards to what your list of things to do, especially in a transaction or a home buying or home selling process. I think insurance needs to kind of go up the ladder a little bit and taking care of it a little sooner than later. So you're not getting into these really tough last minute situations.
Well, and even though we're not talking necessarily about like intentional fraud, one of the things we discussed as we were leading into this call is homeowners insurance often does get left to the very end. Or again, if you're making a cash purchase, it's not required, and you might go to get it afterwards and then discover that it is really expensive because there were perhaps prior water claims or some other extenuating element of the property, especially if you did do a thorough inspection. But under the heading of, like I said, not quite fraud, but very frustrating to people, is when prior water damage isn't disclosed and then it does pop up on the clue report. And
Correct.
sometimes people feel a little misled. It sounds like you've had a number of those scenarios that
Yeah,
come back.
yeah, quite a few. And so we try to have everyone utilize that clue report to their benefit, whether it be on you're buying a home or you're selling a home. And just so everyone is aware, what a clue report is basically just a 7-year running history of any claims that were made against a property. And carriers utilize this and weigh it fairly heavily in their pricing and kind of risk algorithm when, someone is going to obtain insurance on that home and kind of that profile along with the individual. So individually, we have a 5-year kind of, we'll call it credit report, insurance report over our head, and a property has 7. So Yeah, the big issue is, when you're buying a house, the seller has to disclose these certain things that may have happened. With insurance, normally when you file a claim, it is fixed, so they don't necessarily need to put it on the Form 17. So what we just say, even prior to submitting an offer, guys, if you just go to your current carrier or your broker and just say, "Hey, I'm thinking about buying this house. Can you please just run a quote for me on it?" It kills two birds with one stone. It'll give you accurate pricing on what you're probably going to pay for that house, and it'll also give you kind of let's call it just a quick view into the health of the home. If there's been multiple water losses on the home, that should be a red flag for you because there may be something structurally wrong or older piping or something like that that's happening, and you could be kind of protecting yourself from getting into a situation or a home specifically that could cause issues for you.
Well, and one of the things that came up on the panel that you, Dave, Troy, and Alex were on that sort of prompted us scheduling this was the professor from the University of Washington, who is the AI expert, right? Who was talking about purchasing her home. And she was saying, I want a human being, I need a broker to guide me through all of this because you guys are the experts in doing the transaction. But she was talking about how she used AI to research properties. And I think there's interesting overlap here when you start talking about things like water damage, or I was thinking about, you live at the bottom of a hill and maybe you've got issues with flooding, that AI can be a really great tool for doing that kind of research. And then she would take that back to her broker and say, okay, we've got this information. What are our choices now? But I think current homeowners need to know that people will potentially be researching their property this way. And so, it's just good to have some awareness around that. If you ask your broker to give you a quote on a property you're considering buying, will you get a copy of the Clue report? Do you get the full copy?
They absolutely can send you like a screenshot. So what happens basically is we run it into the specific carrier's quoting system, and then at the very end of it, when you kind of input all the necessary information into the application, there's physically a run Clue report button. And once it pops up, we get kind of a digital view of it and we can screenshot it and send it over. Absolutely. And on the sale, if you're listing your home and you have a clean Clue report or anything like that, in a lot of states, you have to disclose prior claims on the home, or you have to provide, in some states, a couple states, you actually have to provide a Clue report as a part of kind of your listing package. But you can ask your incumbent carrier or a broker if you have one, just for a loss history report, which is essentially a Clue report as well. So you can get it on both sides.
While we're here, last year you were with us and you talked to us a little bit about like climate issues. We were talking about coverage with fire, and that is not necessarily a fraud situation, although again, we're talking about protecting your equity. Is there anything else you want us to know that has kind of changed in the last year or that we want to be aware of, even if you're not selling your home, right? For existing homeowners, this conversation is not just about putting your house on the market. It's for
Yeah, I mean, I guess just generally speaking, specifically with climate, we've had 2022, 23, and 24 were record number of $1 billion catastrophic events in the United States that we've had since they started recording it. So on average, normally we have between 8 and 10 a year. And for some reason in the early 2020s, 2021, like I said, and on forward, we kind of broke that record every single year. We'll see how, knock on wood, 2026 ends up. But that's why these carriers are spending so much money on these kind of climate forecasting models. Luckily, we are isolated in an area where we don't have excessive wildfire or hurricanes or tornadoes. However, these are national, global companies. And if they lose billions of dollars in California, they're going to amortize the cost across their whole network. So what we used to pay for insurance, maybe even 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I think those days are a little gone. I don't think the volatility of the market where it has been the last 2 or 3 years is going to stay the same. I think we plateaued there where we're not going to see these massive renewal spikes. But I would just encourage and recommend everyone, like I said, just look at insurance not as much of a pain in the behind as it normally is for everyone, and utilize it as just know where your dollars are going, know where your coverages meet, know where they respond, and just be a little more aware of it. That's all. And if you can have someone that you can call and talk to about it, and again utilize AI to kind of help sit through questions, I do recommend it.
good. Dave, on the tech side, was there anything else that you kind of wanted to pop up? I know we're Actually, I feel like the 45 minutes went fast because this is an interesting conversation to me, but I recognize it's a long time to be on a Zoom call. So we did record this so folks can circle back to it. But yeah, other things, Dave, that you wanted to be sure we touched on?
Well, I think to just continuing to be curious, just piggyback on what Alex was saying, is continue to be curious because this stuff's moving so fast. I saw a video where someone was on a Zoom call with another person on the other side, and it was an AI generated bot, and the person said, wave your hand in front of your face, and the person said, what, and didn't want to do it, and then cut off the call because the person realized, crap, this is an AI generated person on the other line, and it was a Zoom call. It looked completely real. So this is just getting faster and better. There's voice synthesia is one that I know of these products that they're using because I'm in it. So there's just so many different ways that they're going to be able to do this. So I think human to human contact is the one thing that they cannot do, like picking up the phone, calling that human being that you know on the other side.
Well, and that proactive, what Alex is describing, which is just check in with your people. At this point, so many people have so much equity tied up in their home. That's my concern is that people have long considered their home to be like this super safe place to have your money sitting. And so it is really important that you continue to protect it, whether that's from an insurance claim or a fraudster. So we're just hoping to offer some ways that you can be proactive about that and have a heads up of where things are coming from. I don't see any questions in the chat. Anybody want to ask anything before we let these guys go? Thank you so much for the time.
I had a question real quick.
Yeah.
I had a question about the fraud for those, like for sellers or not sellers, but people who find that their home has been sold illegally to someone else. Does it help having your home in a trust because I've to kind of limit that, especially if the home is already paid off and it doesn't have any kind of mortgage or HELOC on it?
Having your home in a trust, all the fraudsters are going to do is just fake a trust and sign as trustees on the deed out.
Okay.
Does it help? No. Does it make it more complicated for a less sophisticated fraudster? Potentially. But then again, they can punch in the name of your trust into Claude and have a 17-page trust agreement built in 45 seconds. So that doesn't necessarily help that much. It could prevent some more unsophisticated ones, though.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Steph. Thanks, Leah.
So from a broker point of view, what is wiring still a safe way to go? Is it better if they bring a cashier's check? Is there a certain period of time? Like, what would you say? That human to human contact makes a lot of sense to me. And so I don't know. I just want to make sure I protect my clients as much as I can. So what do you say on that?
So human to human contact is amazing, but the easier we make it to make life easier, the easier it is for fraudsters to intercept that. We process hundreds of wires every single day. Is it safer than going into your bank, getting a cashier's check, walking into the escrow office and handing it to them? Absolutely not. Wiring is inherently more risky because there isn't face-to-face. That being said, it's not always practical to get a cashier's check, walk it into the escrow office and deposit it. So I think if we follow safeguards and rules and what we talked about, knowing those rules, calling timeout before you send the wire, I think we can mitigate most of the challenges that take place there. But it's never going to be as safe as getting a cashier's check at your bank and walking it in and handing it to someone. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. Is there, if I had a client recently that just was asking me, would it be best for those closing, funds to bring to escrow if it should be a cashier's check? And so I was like, I think it's okay to wire, if they give you the instructions and whatnot. But is there a certain time that needs to season, or is it a case where they just
Yeah, we have to receive the cashier's check for deposit the day before we close, and that's a Washington state law. That's not a CW thing.
That's a really great point to surface because
And your answer to that is it best to get the absolute answer to that? 100% yes. That is the best, safest way to do it.
I mean, unless somebody loses their cashier's check underneath the seat of their car, I might depend on the person and the personality. But
yeah, lost cashier's checks are really bad because typically will take up to 90 days potentially to get that money back into their account.
Yeah.
It is for all intents and purposes capped.
Kind of a big deal. More conversations. That's what we wanted to spark with this dialogue tonight, was more discussion, more awareness, just some ideas on questions to ask, things to be looking out for. And we hope that you will share this with somebody that you know, particularly someone who's not buying or selling currently. I think those are the people that I'm most worried about, because they don't even have any hint that this kind of fraud exists, and so they're much more likely to be victims of it. And we've heard some really sad stories, and that kind of prompted our discussion here. So share the recording along. We'll get a transcript of it. And I thank you both for joining us and being great resources for us here at Windermere. So thank you. And I'm sure if you want to do an insurance checkup, Alex can hook you up with somebody. And Troy, they better all hope basically that they don't ever have to talk to you, because that probably means something has gone very wrong. But thanks for keeping things running over at CW.
Absolutely. We're here for you if you need us. And thank you for this. This is great. This, again, perpetuating the narrative is as important as anything. So
very much so. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll get a copy of the recording out to you, and like I said, share it with a friend. Have a great evening.
Yep. Thank you all.
That's it. Thanks everybody.